I am happy to see that there are still more people joining, but we'll get started in the meantime. And if it's your first session, welcome. And Andrew, the EDP CEO, will give you a little bit of a rundown on what EDP is, who our other partners are, and what this Changemaker Towns Network is in a little while. In the meantime, if we can have everybody turn on their videos if possible. We hope to be able to see everyone. And if we can have everyone present, and then you can switch to gallery mode, it gives a really nice sense of who we've got around this very big table. Also a reminder, please, to get hold of a music or noise-making device for yourself, and we'll be using that a little bit later. The session will be recorded and made available afterwards. So if people haven't been able to attend, you'll get that link from us. And before we get going properly, if we can have Pefumlela take us through the rules of engagement.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be going through the rules of engagement. The first one is please be present. Please close all your other windows on your PC. That includes your emails too, to minimize distractions. We want to make sure that the 2 hours with us, your 2 hours with us are worth your time. The second one is please be patient. We are all learning to live and work in this new online world, and sometimes technology can fail us. And then this third one is share airtime. Let's try to be as brief as possible and make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak. And lastly, be kind. Let's respect each other's views and practice listening to understand and not to respond. Thank you so much. And also please make use of the chat box. We'd love your comments and even questions. Thank you so much.
All right. And then last but not least, we have a really packed program today. A lot of people presenting really interesting things. So if we can make sure that we keep to time for everyone that is presenting. And I'll be making use of these really awesome props. If you can see, here is my police hat. When this goes on, you have 30 seconds left. When this sounds, your time is up. So I will actually make use of that. Don't take offense. And I'm going to be very fair with my timekeeping. Same time for everyone. And yeah, with that, I'll hand over to Andrew. And Andrew, I'm going to keep you to time too. Just note.
Thanks, Simon. You gave me about 40 minutes, didn't you? Yeah.
Yes, for sure, Andrew.
Yeah. Afternoon, everyone, and really thank you for your time. It's really good to see you all on this platform. We know that many towns and regions in South Africa are struggling economically, struggling socially, struggling politically, institutionally, struggling in terms of their environments. And it's easy to feel a bit overwhelmed. It's hard to know where to start rebuilding our communities, our towns, our regions. But fortunately, there are many people who are leading change in towns as we speak, and many of you are on this call. You come from communities, community-based organizations, you come from civil society and NGOs, you come from business, you come from academics and researchers, and also from government. There are change makers leading change in government, and you are the change makers. And this network is designed to help you amplify your stories, learn from each other's initiatives, and build support for change. And it's very good to see. I must just mention, there are some colleagues on this call who've been working in this space for well over 4 decades. And thank you for still being present and still being at it in terms of the cause of small and medium-sized towns in South Africa. For those of you who are new on this call, the EDP is a collaborative intermediary organization, and our job is to help government and non-state actors work together to achieve better development outcomes. The purpose of this network specifically is to support change in non-metro areas through information and knowledge sharing, sharing stories of change processes, understanding the socioeconomic trends affecting towns and their regions, understanding the various policy positions coming from national and provincial and local government, and to help share resource and support opportunities. Secondly, the purpose of the network is peer-to-peer learning. It's the best way to learn from one's peers. Towns learning from each other about what works and what doesn't in terms of local collaborations, local initiatives. And then thirdly, we would like to share partnering and collaboration lessons for those towns wanting to embark on such a journey of change. The network deliberately has 5 categories of participants, and this is a deliberate juxtaposition of different experiences and different roles to try and drive some innovation and change in the system. In other words, if we take ways of collaborating across sectors to try and look at problems and solutions in new ways. So the network sets out to bring together the change makers, the practitioners, the implementers, the negotiators, the activators. Secondly, those of you who are doing research into rural or regional and small town economies and social and environmental conditions affecting people. Thirdly, the policymakers, particularly COCTA and SALGA, and the importance of COCTA's small town regeneration strategy as an example of national policy that impacts on what we're doing here. And just as an aside, I do know that quite a few of our colleagues from public sector are away at the 9th AfriCity Summit in Kisumu, Kenya, as we speak. So they have sent their apologies. Fourthly, we have drawn on board support organizations and networks, and I'm pleased to welcome, in addition to our co-founder, the In Transformation Initiative, also Kagiso Trust, Ranyaka, Democracy Works Foundation, Restaurare, and Accountability Lab, South Africa. And of course, we are open to drawing on additional support partners over time. Please help us to bring more on board by suggesting who else could join this network. And then finally, we draw in storytellers themselves, the journalists, the filmmakers, the artists, the cultural workers who are able to communicate what is happening in our towns, in our communities, in those towns. There's been a growth in the network since our first meeting in March. The number of people on our database is now over 150. So that's almost doubled. That's great. We've developed a number of tools, and Simon will take us through that a little bit later. And there are a number of projects that have been initiated in addition to these online gatherings. So let me just conclude by introducing the agenda today. We've got a lot of short inputs from different towns and projects. In other words, a quick overview of lots of examples of change making on the ground. Secondly, we're going to look at some change making support tools that are available. Thirdly, some analytical tools to help understand the root causes of our problems. We'll fourthly have some examples of regeneration projects. And fifthly, where we are in some government policy and strategy processes. While we're getting a lot of different inputs, could we look out for the following points? and we'll keep coming back to this during the course of the meeting. Firstly, are there lessons we can draw from practitioners, researchers, and the policymakers? Secondly, what are the common trends and themes emerging across the towns that we could note? Thirdly, what are the ideas for action that we all can take back to our towns and organizations to help drive change? Fourthly, how can we connect better to support organizations and networks? And fifthly, are there ways in which we want to engage and influence the policymakers? Simon, back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And I didn't even have to put on my policeman's hat. I'm quite disappointed.
There we go. Leading by example. Very good.
I've popped those points that Andrew is wanting us to look out for into the chat there, if you couldn't manage to collect all of them. So as Andrew said, next up we have a session on change making on the ground, what's happening around South Africa, and just very short, sharp inputs. And first in this slot, we have Siyabonga Stenga. He's from Mbekweni in Paarl. Marcelo, if you want to just share those slides now. He's doing a lot of work with cleanups in illegal dumping sites that he turns in productive spaces. So Siyabonga, over to you. Siyabonga. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Oh, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay.
You can just help Marcela, so when you want to flip the slides, but the before and after pictures there.
Okay. So should I start now?
Go for it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, as you know, illegal dumping is quite a challenge for each and every township currently here in the Western Cape. As you know that what I'm doing is basically convert these spaces into productive spaces, emphasizing on youth activities, of course. Reason why we all know that we have this crisis that we have of youth unemployment. What I do in these spaces, it's quite tricky and challenging because, you know, it depends on which area or which section that I'm working on. You'll find that it comes with each and every business. What I use, or actually normally tell them that, you know what, we could actually help in generating our economy within the spaces. Hence, I introduced the hydro dipping that I told you about. I think it's in the slide. I think I have an example which is it's an art form done with shoes, which I actually charge the public 60 Rand for a pair. That's actually how we actually generate the sustainability of these projects. You know, as you can see also that's how we actually sustain the paints, if you, because you know what, with this project we literally go door to door in finding sustainability, even in finding resources as we actually would do these projects, you know, because we'll what we'll do is we'll literally go door to door asking for tools, or maybe leftover paints which may use for these spaces. Currently I have about 40 in the Western Cape. We have Langa, in Mbekweni, of course. What we do is we have the mini Chisanyamas. Yeah, that's a hydro dip. We have Chisanyamas. We have car wash. We have, as well as, if the space is big enough, we'll probably do a talent search. Yeah, because you mentioned there's a lot of things that could be done within the spaces, unlike being seen as dumping sites, you know. And I also believe that more and more constructive ideas could be utilized within these spaces. And it's so sad in this crisis. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to have to just keep it tight. Otherwise, we get stuck. And thank you so much. This is just a taster, and we'll have a Q&A afterwards where people can ask exactly how you go about doing these incredible things. Michelle, I'm going to call on you next. Michelle Kurofa is from Changemaker Hub in the Cedarburg. Michelle, are you going to be sharing your own slides?
Yes, please.
Cool, you can just hit share screen. So she's been working with different members in a coalition based in Clanwilliam, I believe.
Hi, everybody. I think it's nothing unusual in a group like ourselves as change makers to be addressing the sustainable development goals, but in impoverished areas and specifically informal settlements, are we going around in circles? So we are working towards a blueprint for change. We want to create access across sectors, but also within those sectors, ensuring that we leave no man, woman, or child behind with tangible results. So walking with less talking. Our ripple effect is inclusive. We want to create capacity and ensure that by the time we're finished, we have something that we can share. We're working in the Clanwilliam area, and we have an MOU with the Cedarburg municipality, and our second rollout is in Lambert's Bay, then Craftwater and Yellands Bay. And essentially what we're doing is developing an agency. So we are compliant, we have Section 18A PBO status, and we've been doing this work for a long time. So we want to pull in partnerships from all over the town and create agency for them to do what they need to do. Our success to date is that we have 27 partnerships across the sectors. We've educated 2,900 people on circular economy. Most people don't understand environment when they are trying to survive. We've also trained trainers so that they can continue training and repurposed 20,000 litres of non-recyclable plastic, created 7 micro-waste entrepreneurs with 390 tonnes of recycled plastic coming directly from a non-serviced informal settlement. And then on the greening, we've propagated 4,500 speckworm. And as you can see, it's basically a circle that continues to go on, and we have small amounts of time, so I won't talk about it too much, but I'm hoping to be able to share this blueprint, but definitely by the end of 2023 to anybody interested. So I think on a partnership perspective, we have done well by getting the Nelson Mandela Foundation to come and have a look and see what we're doing, and they then shared this across their platforms, and so we are able to get the success and the interest for investment into the area. Here you can see the greening that we've done. We chose the speckworm specifically because it's a fire retardant. It's very easy to grow in the area, and the idea is to stop the spread of fires. But food gardens are the ultimate goal. We now have a common space that we're creating, and it's very exciting. Jan on call is our custodian in Clanwilliam, and this is basically common ground where the eco bricks and the benches are going to come together with food garden examples, and then that will create a training ground for us to be able to continue. And that's it.
Thank you, Michelle. And I didn't even have to use the whistle to observe the hat.
That's all the hat.
All right, great. Next up, we have Sekutlane Amodi. They're from Accountability Lab Integrity Idols program, and they're going to brief us exactly what they're doing with regard to public officials and the time that we have left to support our public officials. Sekutlane.
Great. Thank you, Simon, and thank you, colleagues. I'm not going to talk too long. I just want to show you a minute-long video. It's on a minute on the dot. But just simply to give you context, just simply to say that we are in the last 12 days of our nomination period for our Integrity Icon campaign to name and fame public service excellence in our small towns and communities. Our public servants often get a bad rap for not being able to deliver the frontline services that we need so much from them, given the various kinds of capacity and resource constraints on them. It's important for us as was said before by Andrew, I think, in the previous meeting, that we really want to focus on what is strong rather than on what is wrong. And this campaign continues in that line as well by doing this work of calling on local people to identify, name and fame and lift up local public servants, public service heroes who are doing the very best that they can in service. And so here is the video that I would like to just share with you for a moment. It's only a minute long, and I hope you can be able to make a nomination or share the nomination details within your networks. Thank you.
Integrity means to be loyal. Integrity means to be the right thing with the time.
Integrity to me means devoting all your human senses to humanity. I chose to make a difference. Integrity to me means being honest, means being true to myself, being accountable for my actions.
If I see this, I can't stop because I want to see that person happy at the end. I love what I do because I can make a difference in people's lives.
Integrity to me is being who you are, but making sure that other people get more from you.
And that's it. I'll drop all the nomination details in the chat. Just look for integrityicon.org/south-Africa, and you'll be guided as to how to go about making a nomination. We even have a WhatsApp line. I'll share further details momentarily. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So wonderful. I love the concept of naming and faming those integrity icons as a very fresh approach in South Africa's usual landscape when it comes to public officials. Susan Spires is the lead of Real Life Commit. And Marcella, if you can share the video where she's describing what she's been working on as well. We'll just, if you can make the sound a little clearer, that would be wonderful. Let's hope that works. No sound on our side.
Good day, I'm Susanna Kruger. I'm the founder of Real Life Commit. Real Life Commit is an organization for persons with disabilities. What we do on a daily basis, we have a workshop where people with disabilities learn skills like crafting, needlework, and also knitting. We also have a computer lab where we learn them the basic computer literacy. And we also commit ourselves to better the lives of persons with disabilities and to help them to become entrepreneurs to sustain themselves as well as their families. We as an organization, we reach out not only for people in Oudtshoorn, but also the surrounding areas. So we service the greater Oudtshoorn. We also have two learnerships because we have accredited facilitators, assessors, as well as moderators. So in all, we are an organization not only for people with disabilities, but also we also help those unemployed people to get their CVs right and also to do the applications at our offices. Thank you.
Great. So Susan actually is based in Oudtshoorn, where I was earlier this week for the Small Town Regeneration Karoo Conference. And you'll be hearing more about that later as well from some other people. Would anybody like to share what they're doing as change makers and take the so-called spotlight for the just for a minute or 2 minutes? Don't know if anyone has the guts to do that right now. And we are going.
Simon, it's
Yes.
Peter Ahmad here from Manyaka. Good afternoon,
Thanks.
colleagues. I do have a very short video, if time allows, to just explain some of what the Proud of My Town initiative that Manyaka has been running with, but only if time allows.
If it can fit within 2 minutes, then go for it. If you can share your screen, and while you get that set up, I'm going to ask Bongiwe to come on. Bongiwe, go for it.
Hello everyone, I'm Bongiwe from Manfred in the Eastern Cape in the rural areas. I am currently doing land rehabilitation, clearing in alien invasive and turning the biomass into the products. Currently looking out for other products to start producing other products, but now we are currently producing charcoal and working with eco schools to do awareness on the environment and having youth being interested in regenerative agriculture and livestock farming. Amazing.
Thank you. If you want to drop your details or where we can find out more into the chat, that would be really, really helpful. Okay. So Pete comes from Ranyaka, as he mentioned, and as Andrew said, Ranyaka is a new support partner for this Changemaker Towns Network. So we're excited that you're sharing this. Pete, you can go for it. Thanks. No sound on our side yet.
What is a town? Is it a collection of buildings? Is it a certain number of people? Or a map? A road sign? If this is what a town is, then a bank is simply a financial institution, a commercial enterprise, a balance sheet, a website, a preferential interest rate. So, no. A town is not just a collection of buildings. It's a community. It is a future, a past. It is a place to grow, to learn, to share our stories and nurture who we are and who we want to become. A town produces people who have potential to be anything. It gives them roots. And sometimes a town needs help.
Ranyaka is a non-profit company that we've established to go and assist communities to help themselves and in the development of the area, of the people that stays there. It's just amazing to see people suddenly understanding where they fit into a bigger process, what is their skill and what is their passion, their purpose, and how they fit into the puzzle. It's real community development.
And ensuring that we deliver services that are appropriate, that are relevant, and could be owned by the community, because that's the only way that a community development project could be sustainable.
They're building the people within the town, they're building the industries, the networks, the communities, the businesses. People and communities and towns are transformed because you've looked so much deeper than just the once-off contributions you can make.
People need to see their own community members starting to do things, and it's mentorship. People start to connect with that, and they start to see the possibilities because it's people from their community. And that's something that the outside organization cannot bring.
When we at Nedbank decided that a bank is more than a financial institution, more than a building on the corner of Dorp and Main. We began investing in towns. And so, in partnership with Ranyaka, we have made the stories of towns our story, and we're proud of it.
Wow, wonderful. I think that that is a halala moment. So I asked you guys to bring your musical instruments or noise-making devices. If you want to just pop on your sound so that we can hear you. So take yourselves off mute very quickly and just make the noise of your choice. La la la. Wow, thank you. That was nice. Jenny, I think you need to have a solo moment at some point. Great. So Andrew, if you can take us through just a discussion on this. I don't know if you've pinpointed any items as a result of what you were looking for, Andrew, but I certainly think there's a lot to take out from these popcorn inputs.
Thanks, Simon. I mean, I'm keen that we hear from anyone else on this call about what you're observing. But just to kick off with sort of 3 points from my side. I mean, from Siyabonga, Michelle, Susan, and Bongiwe, we heard about citizens taking action on very basic things like cleaning up or getting rid of invasive alien, addressing issues of poverty on the ground and things like that, local economic development. So I suppose the question is, someone mute there? Okay. The question is, how do we build a more enabling environment for citizen action? Because sometimes it is a struggle to take it further. And I did put up that quote, which I love, from Nabil Hamdi: don't think too much before you start working. In other words, step into action. Don't plan for ages, but then don't work too much before you stop and start to reflect. In other words, so you need to shift and change. So it's adaptive programming and planning and delivery. I think from Pete's the Proud of My Town video, what I heard right up front is that town is not just a collection of buildings. We can wax lyrical about, buildings in small towns that have historical value, but it's the people who drive a town and the people who drive change. So from that very powerful video, I took that out. And then Sekotlane, focusing on really how do we recognize and acknowledge and inspire change, because it's easy to cut people down, criticize, particularly on social media, which is a kind of slash and burn forum often. It's pointing out people's faults or where we differ and can't work together. And so I was very inspired by that message that they were bringing here. But anyone else, any other comments, any other responses to our first set of change makers? Sekotlane.
Thanks, Andrew. I just really wanted to recognize that first input that we had. I thought it was really inspiring, and it reminded me of a little bit of work that I did a couple of years ago, just in surfacing stories around, people who are bringing themselves to the work of, clearing our environment, building a consciousness around it, as well as building community around those values down in Cape Town. And this is Georgia McTaggart. I've just dropped in a link here. This is Georgia McTaggart, who has this wonderful charity which kind of combines the work of river and canal cleanups with the work of creating employment for local people and community around these two key issues in the city. And I thought, just in terms of how do we, just to respond to your question of how do we enable that even further, I thought there was something really amazing about how she was collaborating with the city, with city officials themselves at the front line, the waste disposal people who schedule that work, and how the collections, and how there's now a really interesting ecosystem kind of developing around clearing canals, creating employment, and making our cities cleaner, better, safer places to be. And I'm just wondering, how could that kind of stuff be, or that kind of work be scaled up, built up, and a more popular consciousness, that an endorsement by cities, towns, municipalities, how could that be facilitated in order to really kind of inspire us to do more things like that?
Thanks very much. Well, Peter, I'm going to bring you in here as someone who has been working for large institutions of government till very recently, now working for an NGO, looking at community development and towns. There's many examples of citizens driving change, taking action. And Setlane, your example of cleaning up rivers is another good one. It's something that citizens can take into their own hands. They don't have to wait to be told what to do, or wait for formal authority or anything like that. But taking action can often be small scale, and it can even be quite isolated. So how do you scale up these things? And Pete, you said, what's the long game here? How do we join efforts so we're not working alone, and also join efforts with the institutions with the big budgets and the resources, like a municipality or and government? Pete?
Yeah, Andrew, thanks. And again, afternoon, colleagues, and a sincere appreciation for this platform and this coming together of the community. I think the point I'm making there in the chat, Andrew, is that so often, things are short term, very much sort of, rah-rah moments, which may inspire in the very short term, but often, let's say, over promise and under deliver. The ability of the various players, I think that was one of the themes that I saw coming through from various presentations, is working within the limitations as opposed to waiting for a big bang approach. And the long term, those communities who are captive within their community, their ability to steer the ship, their ability to take ownership, I think, is what we need to be fostering and developing. So many things are, I say, my experience within metropolitan government between Johannesburg and Cape Town is packaged around the big picture of an integrated development plan, a municipal spatial framework, which are important, but they can't be the heartbeat of these community initiatives. And I think how we start to marry the community initiative with the corporate and make sure that the resources that are required. You saw Nedbank in the one instance. There seems to be a lot of money out there in terms of for sponsorship and donor funding, but the coordination of that and the maximization of that, I think, is a fundamental that we need to be challenging ourselves as much as anything. So there's just a few pointers, Andrew, quite a shotgun approach in my own sort of overview, but how we link the communities to the corporate, how the sustainability of those in terms of longer term perspectives, I think are important aspects we should be thinking about. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Simon, I don't see any other hands, so maybe we're probably on time for the next session. So can I hand back to you?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to pick up on what Siyabonga was actually presenting on, and in relation to what Pete mentioned. And it's incredible that these kind of social enterprise approaches can lead to some income generation for initiatives, for local initiatives, like what he's doing with the hydro dipping, as he calls it, with shoes and with a car wash. And I know that he has other trading going on in these spaces that have been cleared on street corners that were previously totally underutilized and abused as dump sites. And I just really like that kind of approach as well. I'm wondering now, or at other points, if people can share For instance, Michelle also mentioned how they seem to be generating an income from the recycling collected or otherwise, and that kind of approach of generating an income from the activity, as well as not only relying on donor funding or external government support. Michelle, I don't know if you want to come in on that now before I know you have to go as well. You might have already dropped off.
Hi, yes, it's our food distribution day, so thank you so much. I think it's really important, like we talk about the inclusivity, and I think the circular economy needs to be challenged from a theoretical perspective, because while all of that is happening, change of packaging, etc., the most vulnerable are still, and so micro entrepreneurs, paying them per kilogram, and it lands up being tonnage, is empowering, because somebody doing something instead of waiting. And then also the food garden, we call them backyard gardens, are small enough that we put it into creches, and we include herbs and we include medicinal plants. So rosemary, for example, is really good for congestion. And that becomes an empowering aspect, maybe small, but it is important to create empowerment where no one's waiting.
Thanks. Okay, and that rounds up this session. Next up, we're going to have Phefumlela, and what she's going to be presenting is some things that EDP has been working on that are tools to support change making, and also to support research and the support work for change makers in small towns and in intermediate towns and cities. So Phefumlela, if you want to start sharing your screen, she's going to be showing the support tools that she's been working on. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as Simon said, I'll basically be sharing the 4 network tools that we've been developing for the last couple of months. And our first one, it's the network database, which basically contains contact details of our current network members. Basically consists of your researchers, your academics, amplifiers, support partners and organizations, your municipalities and your policymakers, and lastly, your active citizens. As Andrew mentioned, earlier, we are wanting to grow the network. So we do ask that people do send in their suggestions on people who can form part of this network. And then our second one is the offers and needs catalog or database. This basically contains the offers and needs that were brought forward in our previous network meeting. We do have it in a form of like it shows in a map, which makes it more visually appealing, because right now it's just too many words. So I don't think people quite get what is out there, what is actually being offered, and what are the needs are. So I will share it a bit later in the interactive map for you to understand where these offers and needs are actually coming from in the country. And then thirdly, we have the research and resources database. This is basically a database for everyone. So researchers, journalists, amplifiers, and it's basically a platform we would like people to share articles and research on small towns. We saw that there's actually quite a limited information with regards to small towns, and we would like to basically grow this and to ensure that there's enough information on small towns. And the platform we'll be using is UCASA, the UCASA Library Lab. So we do encourage people to sign up and share all these articles, etc. And then lastly, we have the interactive map that I previously mentioned. So basically, this interactive map is a map that showcases the network members' initiatives across South Africa. So we have the support partners and where they are based. And then we've got the initiatives that are within the Towns Network. So for instance, like Pete mentioned, Proud of My Town is pretty much all over South Africa. And in the interactive map, you'll be able to click on each initiative. And once you click on it, it will give you a brief description of what is actually going on in the town and who the initiator is. And if you are keen on finding out more information about that initiative, there is a link attached in the description in which you can click to find out a bit more. And then, like I also said, the offers and needs. Also, the offers and needs catalog. Also, the description shares what that specific initiative or organization is offering, and it also shares what they actually need. Like, for instance, the Makanda Unity Circle have expressed their interest in wanting to access the network database. And then lastly, I'm not sure if it's going to be Simon or Marcella. They're both going to, either one of them will be sharing a poll on whether, basically asking if we could, if we should make the people's database a public document, if I can say. So please do participate in this poll so that we do know what everybody wants. Thank you very much.
Just to clarify, so it's not going to be a public to the public, but we're wanting to find out, should we share it amongst those people that are on our database already? So those people that have personally expressed interest in being part of this network. So it's not that we would send it beyond that group.
Yeah.
Okay, while you finish up there, thanks, Befumlela. The map, we'll share a more concise link with you after this, and we'll be sending out all of the tools so that we can start accessing them. The Yokesa platform, we've registered as an organization, and we're working with with Mark Napier and the organizers there to upload the resources, but it'll probably be in the next week or two that the resources and research database is up and running. But in the meantime, if you have any ideas on how we could make the offers and needs database more accessible and viewable, it's a very powerful platform. Basically, it allows people to, I mean, it's a very powerful concept, but we're struggling with what the best platform is to do. Is basically it's enabling people that have resources or ideas or knowledge or whatever to share, to get on that, and those that don't or that are needing other additional resources or help with something, that they can put their request up on the needs side. Interestingly, from the last exercise that we ran in the last session, we actually had by far the most, I think it was about 50 additions that were offers, and around 2/3 of that were needs. So it's kind of an inspiring story in itself that so many more offers were added than needs. Okay, great. So we have, let's see, we have 89% of people that have said that we should allow access to the people database for participants, and 11% not. If you have a strong objection to your details not being shared, if you can just maybe drop me an email or send me a private chat now, and we'll make sure that your details are not shared. But otherwise, it looks like people are wanting to have access to that database and have public, in-network access to that. Okay, nice. Next up, we're going to be talking about the Connections Carnival. Marcella, if you can pull up that slide. As Andrew mentioned, we have within EDP been working on different ideas on how to not only have the network exist as a kind of broader impact, but more kind of a learning and support network side of things, which is what we have here, but how we can also embellish that both through the tools side, which we've just been through, and also through the project side. So one of the projects that we kind of going to be talking about a little bit more in depth today is the Connections Carnival. There's been a lot of precedent within South Africa when it comes to festivals and fates and events, drawing people together and building partnership towards action. And in the next session, we're going to be hearing from people that have organized and participated in Kaka and Ka in the Karoo and Oudtshoorn. And that's one very clear precedent for how these things can, these events can contribute to regeneration of small towns. And I'm sure many of us have experiences of that, if you'd like to share that in the chat. And there also have been Trash to Treasure festivals in Greyton, even in Joburg inner city, where I was working previously, there were many festivals we worked in there. And so what we're doing with this is that we're looking for changemaker-led events like festival, parades, fates, or games, showcasing the local assets of the town. So it's through a what is strong rather than what is wrong approach, and celebrating what is strong in the town. And it can be alongside existing festivals or existing events. It can be adding to that, or it can be a new idea that's going to contribute towards partnering. And as EDP, we'll be offering micro grants or seed funding and some partnering support to assist you, but that will be mostly remotely. So we're not going to be able to have the resources to kind of assist you in person, most likely. But these micro grants will be made available for you to catalyze action and partnering in your own town through a festival or a project or an event of some kind. And the aim is to build partnership and enable change making towards good governance, or conflict resolution or integration, towards regeneration within and between towns. We're also partnering with the Daily Maverick and a storytellers or collaborative storytelling project, where we are going to showcase either what you're doing in that town or additional stories of change making that are surrounding this kind of this Connections Carnival. So we'll choose between 4 and 6 finalist towns and offer the prizes to those towns in particular. We're going to close applications on the 17th of June, and hoping that the Connection Carnival events will take place between July and November. And then we'll be linking, as I said, to other forms of amplification, so that we're going to tell the story in an inspiring way and hopefully lead to additional events and change making in other towns. So yeah, I'm excited. We've already actually, because we sort of did a very soft launch in the last session, and so we've already received a few interesting applications. And how we're planning to do it is not have necessarily a roadshow going between the towns, but we are wanting to connect the towns almost through a kind of Olympic torch way of doing it, so that you hand over the baton to the next in that program, and that we can advertise this program as the Connections Carnival that links the different towns together. All right, so as long as there's no questions, are there any questions on that? Yes, it is. Thank you, Angelo. It is very exciting. I'll hand over now to Kaka and Ka and the Karoo Karta and the gang. And Marcelo, you can stop screen sharing, thanks. So Vaughan, are you taking it forward?
I can. Hi, everybody. And it's nice to see some of my colleagues from the ACC and people that I've met working at the City of Cape Town in this session, and just to acknowledge the really interesting presentations earlier around in the popcorn session around kind of smaller social interventions that really have big impact. And that kind of just leads us to where we're starting today. I'm going to hand over to Hichu Tiat from the Car as a creative director, who will just kind of talk through the Car as a bigger festival that has a long-standing partnership with the town of Oudtshoorn. And then myself, Tiffany, and Glenisha will talk around Karoo Karta, which was an initiative, well, a project commissioned by the Car to develop a community-led festival program for the main part of the festival. So it was, yeah. So I'll let Hichu speak first, and then I'll carry on from there. Hichu.
Thank you, Vaughan. Hello, everyone. This is really fascinating and wonderful to hear everyone's projects, and thank you for inviting us. I'm just quickly going to give you a little bit of a background for those who don't know the Clankaroo National Arts Festival. It's a festival that started almost 3 decades ago in Oudtshoorn, and the idea was for the festival to be an economic injection into the town. And it has built a reputation as a artistic hub and one of the largest national arts festivals in the country. Just a quick number before COVID hit us, the impact on the town, just for the few days that the festival takes place, usually about 7 days, is around about 54 million rand economic impact in Oudtshoorn alone, and then between 161 to 178 million in the Western Cape. And then COVID came, and for 2 years we couldn't really do anything. And we started with a project which we called the Clankaroo Arts Academy. I think the positive, there's a lot of negative things that happened with the pandemic, and but what happened with us was that we could also reevaluate everything that we're doing and how we're approaching, especially what we're doing in the town and the impact that the arts can have within a community. One of the main aims of the festival is is social cohesion, is to look at how we can change society through the arts. And last year, I started talking and thinking about how we can revitalize the project that we started just before the pandemic in the town of Oudtshoorn. And it was ultimately, the main thing is that we realized that a lot of the time with a festival, it's a 7-day festival, but we actually work year long, and we're here in Oudtshoorn. So the impact should be here. And we realized that what often happens, and I think everyone would have that experience, and it's been mentioned here as well, is that it's a flash in the pan. It's a little bit of people come in, they do a 7-day workshop or a 5-day workshop, and suddenly there's a performance, and then after that nothing happens, or there's a big plans of something, but it's not sustainable. So it was important for us to look at sustainability of a project, to look at a project that can really address social issues in the town, to bring a town together, to bring different groups in the town together. And we're talking about also from the elders to the younger generation, because there's also a huge gap in Oudtshoorn with that. And I think many towns have that problem. So it's about connecting people and getting people in the town to actually talk about the issues, and actually to address the issues, and not kind of sidestep it, or just use arts just as entertainment, but for people to share their stories, to tell their stories through and through different mediums. And that's how we decided to ultimately commission. And the other thing is we can talk a lot, and we can you can talk and you can wait for the funding to come, but ultimately you have to take action. Whether the funding is there or not, you have to start somewhere. And we were lucky enough to connect with Neil Coppen and Vaughan Sadie, and it was incredible to start talking to them about previous projects that they did, and it just felt right to collaborate with them, because what ultimately came out of this was Carta, and it is a project that we started talking about in May. It's really kind of, the work started in August, and ultimately the first phase of that was presented at the festival. Yay, we could actually host the festival again after 3 years in March this year. And it was incredible to see what the outcomes was just in such a short period of time. But it is something that is that we're working on to make sustainable, and we've got a long-term plan with it. And what I told Neil and Vaughan and everyone participating in it, ultimately we have to do and we have to show, because then hopefully we can show people what a project like this could mean and how it can change a society and the impact it can have, and also create work and transfer skills, and ultimately for the town to take ownership of this project, because I think that's extremely important, and that it's not just an outside kind of project that's run by people from the outside, but ultimately it's, really that the people involved from the town takes ownership. I don't have much more to say, and I can speak for hours about this because I'm really excited about the future of this. What I can say just quickly before I hand over to Vaughan is that what happened is that we showed a little bit of what this project can be, and what is happening slowly is that a lot of the partners that we invited, potential sponsors, potential affiliates, potential people that could also support this to make it sustainable during the festival, we got really positive responses, and we're really hoping that this will that we will be able to utilize that, and to actually that over the next few years that we will get the funding that we need to actually grow this into what it could be. And hopefully this could also become a model for different festivals and different towns on how a project, what kind of projects, and how, I was so impressed with what Vaughan and Neil did in such a interesting and effective way, but actually a very simple way. But it takes time and it takes effort, and it takes it needs a long period, and that's why we're working on this for as a long-term project and not just a flash in the pan. Vaughan, I'm handing over to you.
Thank you, Hifu. I think you said most of what I want to say, but I think what is important for me to do is just to do a quick brief presentation on just what the project process was and what we delivered before I hand over to Glenisha and Tiffany just to speak about their experiences as participants in the process and what they see as community members of Oudtshoorn, the potential future for the project. So my colleague Neil Coppen and I facilitated an in-depth process of oral history training with 10 local artists, performers, artists of all types. And what was important there for us was to kind of really think through what skill sets were needed for a kind of a different way of thinking around an arts practice, which is kind of a living heritage, which includes living heritage as a way of really understanding the community and the spaces that we were working in that could then translate into various outputs that could kind of sit in a theater, could sit in a visual arts exhibition and spaces like that. And this process we ran over 4 months, and those were weekly workshops where we would meet after participants did oral histories. Those were reflected upon collectively, where we as a group started to understand what stories were emerging, and we understood what the new emerging narratives were of this small town around a kind of its own culture, the town itself, and what it is as a place and what it means as a resource, both as a social resource and an economic resource. But out of that, what we were really interested in was producing some creative outputs, and those emerged out of conversations with our core group of participants. And it was really them who kind of led where we went with everything. So the desire for a play came out of discussions, kind of thinking around what the visual arts could be. We ended up working on a large-scale mural inside a community hall. We also designed 3 exhibitions that explained the project process, one that kind of went in depth into how the play was devised, and another one that showed how we work with collage as a medium for storytelling and kind of gave insight into some of the public participatory processes that we were doing. So for us, I mean, this process was just really important as facilitators to guide our participants through this process so that they were also not just learning like core skills of how to kind of create theater or how to create visual art, but also understanding the kind of critical thinking and conceptual thinking that goes behind devising projects and processes. And Ganesha, who will be talking in a little while, was our core project manager, and we kind of worked with her on the process to kind of start to develop that skill, further develop her own skills to become the project manager for the project going forward. And then Tiffany was the lead writer in the theatre production, but also kind of and one of the lead researchers, and kind of just kind of bolstering their skills to make them, give them the capacity to kind of work and test those skills within the project as well. So for us, a really successful intervention, and something that really takes time and a lot of consideration around thinking around just what those skills mean within the community of Oudtshoorn, outside of Neil's and mine intervention. And the goal would essentially be is that as the project evolves, that Neil and I step back and become kind of advisors and kind of sit on some kind of advisory board as we develop that structure. But participants like Ganesha and Tiffany then start to run the project with the support from the car, myself and Neil and other partners that we bring on. Ganesha, do you want to just give some insight into your learning and your understanding of the project?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, Yvonne already introduced me, so no need for me to introduce myself. The impact that this project had on me, Karoo Kaarte itself, first of all, to be open-minded as a person, to grow emotionally, socially, and just to allow myself to just embrace and acknowledge people on this whole process. In the beginning, it was a bit hard to actually you need to socialize yourself, and you need to just step in order for you to make sense. And while I had to step back and just went in the research itself and the whole processes of Vaughan and Neil, I had to allow myself to make sense of what I am learning. And initially the research itself and connecting with the people within my community allowed me to see the people in my community for who they are, to see their scars and acknowledge them, and actually just to tell them, I see you. And I know what you've gone through with the research and the interviews that we did with them. And it also helped me to see my emotions and my trauma and what I suffered through life, and just to tell myself that I need to take responsibility for my own healing. And because throughout this whole process, healing was the main thing that actually the main factor of it all, that you learned and you processed. And also to remind myself that I am responsible for all the stuff. And as my one colleague mentioned, her name, my one colleague mentioned that you can take the color pencils now in your community, and regarding the inevitable that you see in your community, the negativity, you see the good in your community now, and you take the color pencils and you color within the lines or above the lines. So yes, you see a colorful community now, not only the brokenness in the community, but you actually see the beauty within everything.
Dankie, Ganesha. Tiffany, I think before Simon puts on his police hat and blows a whistle, you're going to have to push through how you imagine the project in the future for the town of Oudtshoorn. And yeah, thank you. wherever you are, Tiffany. There's too many blocks here.
Hi, I'm Tiffany. I'm an upcoming playwright, poet, and aspiring theatre director. I'm also one of the researchers and core team members of the Changemaker project. As Vaughan mentioned, 10 researchers from Oudtshoorn joined Human and also with the help of Shanda Harris, who was almost like the administrative liaison with the Changemaker. It started out like that, and those 10 researchers were employed, you know, for the duration of this project, which was 4 to 6 months. And then when we got to the point of having the creative outcomes, the play, and also the visual arts element, 10 local actors were employed and 5 visual artists were employed. Economically, this project, you know, created employment and skills development opportunities. And I see this project, you know, with the right funding and support, continuing to create even more such opportunities, ultimately contributing to the financial growth of Oudtshoorn. Culturally, we've barely scratched the surface with our interviews. We interviewed so many people whose stories were always overlooked and disregarded. And I remember when I got into this process, one of the core objectives was to put stories that have been neglected, stories that have been put, I've not been told to put them at the forefront of future festivals. And I think we've done a little bit just to get closer to that point, because culturally we've you know, like I said, we scratched the surface. I anticipate this project will discover even more stories as the number of researchers grow within the next 3 to 5 years. These stories, you know, however difficult to tell or explore, will provide the backbone of works of arts and theatre productions for years to come. We hope, of course, you know, to include schools also, so that parents, children, parents, grandparents, all participate in preserving their cultural heritage, you know, like avoid the erasure of these important stories. And I think Changemaker has taken, you know, however small the strides, has taken immense initiative and has taken great strides to get us towards that point. And I'm excited to see just even the small impact that we'll have, and how we'll encourage other people and organizations to do exactly the same thing. So yeah, 3 to 5 years seems like a long time from now, but I'm pretty sure it'll fly by. We'll have people coming from school, joining the project as researchers and as creatives. We'll have professionals in the community joining and sharing their skills also. And I'm truly positive that with the right funding and support from organization with impact and power, we'll do that. I have absolute faith.
Sure, just before the whistle, thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for your input. Well, that's us from the Changemaker Karukata. I'm sorry for there's no slides. We're in the process of distilling everything down into short presentations that don't take 3 hours. So thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity, EDP, Simon, and Marcella. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. So I think that's another halala moment. I'm taking my whistle, Vaughan, but this is for just a quick... thank you. And if you had a look, guys, in the chat, Marcella did post an article that she wrote on the work that they've been doing as part of Changemaker and Kaka and Ka. So just scroll up there to the Daily Maverick article, and it has some images as well. It's also just about the Kaka and Ka in general. I think what's really exciting is that, you know, there are links already that I'm hearing in terms of timelines, and what was mentioned earlier, that regeneration is we do have to look at these longer timelines. Also that regeneration is not just about the buildings, and it's about healing and people, and these small projects that can be networked together and scaled across different towns through different approaches. I think what we also, okay, going to hold there actually before someone blows the whistle on me. Next up, we're going to have two inputs. Firstly, from Frederick Fourie of University of the Free State, and he's going to be talking about towns and township integrated development in South African small towns towards a how-to guide. So now what we're looking at is this economic development approach and looking more at the financial economic or financial accounting understanding of economics, but this commonly overlooked aspect of how townships are part of the towns, and in many ways both regeneration of the towns and of townships rely on each other. So I think, Frederick, if you're able to just start sharing your screen. If you do have questions, what we're going to be doing after this is that we'll all be invited to discuss all three presentations, and you can put forward any questions to the speakers as all three of the presentations afterwards. Okay, I'm just seeing, Frederick, I don't know if you can just make it full screen. We're able to still see the next slide, which means it's quite small.
Okay, I'm always confused with that.
Yeah, that looks about right.
No, that doesn't help.
Thank you. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, good. Thanks very much, Simon. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for giving me opportunity. I just want to tell you a bit about a project that we're doing under the Center for Development Support at the UFS. In a small town in the Free State and township. The township is Ramulotsi and the town is Viljoenskroon in the northwest of the Free State. And looking at the township and town together, and I want to tell you a bit about that and suggest that the townships should be part and parcel of any thought to regenerate or develop a town. And I hope I can make that case. So my main points are these: that unemployment and poverty and inequality originates in towns and cities, obviously. It's not some abstract economist's concept. It is there, it sits there, it lives there, you see it in front of your eyes. So if we want to look at increasing income and employment in the country, but also in every town, I'm arguing we must include the township economy, and that means the informal sector. Millions of people work in the informal sector in the country, but there's not much policy support. The sector is largely ignored in any kind of major economic policy document or stimulus packages and summits and things. Sometimes it's mentioned, but mostly in the context of an industrial park, which is not a township project really. It doesn't change the township economy as such. So what can one do then to include the township and the informal sector? Now, just about what is the informal sector? Many policymakers see it as sort of not worth attending to, really. It's mostly street traders or own account workers with few skills. Some say, well, they have no ambition, they're not survivalists, it's not worth spending time on them. And I've seen policymakers and economists write these things in the last 10 or 20 years, or even as just being illegal, which is a misconception. This picture is not at all correct, and our research on a national level, but also now in a town, show that most of these, or many of them, are really proper enterprises, but they are vulnerable. They're embryonic or seedling enterprises, and you must look at them in that way. Don't look down upon them. Now, just generally, a few points about the informal sector in the country. This is South African data. How many enterprises? About 2 million. How many people work there? 3 million. Now, the important one out of every 6 who work in this country work in the informal sector. 1 out of every 6. About paid employment, many people think it's mostly unpaid or family members. It's not correct. 20% of informal enterprises in the country have paid employees, and a total of 1.2 million paid workers. That is 3 times the direct employment in the formal mining sector. Just take that in. And if you look at the kind of attention going to the mining sector as against the informal sector. Now, obviously, there are many things like foreign exchange and stuff being earned by the mining sector, but employment-wise, this is a major different picture, I think, from what many people may have. Okay, another thing is that people see the informal sector as stagnant. In our national analysis, we got this results then that in a particular one-year period, more than 500,000 new jobs were created in the informal sector. And that was both expansion of existing enterprises, employing more people, and entry of new enterprises with employees, obviously. Now, we see there the startups often closed, like in the formal sector, so there's a vulnerability, but that doesn't take away how many net jobs are created. So I think the point we made, and there was a book written about this and national figures about this, that the sector needs to be supported to sustain and amplify its job creation. And then I want to add, in every town and every city and every metro. Now, another point, most people see street traders and waste pickers, and they think that's the whole sector. Now, there's nothing wrong with street traders and waste pickers, but I think it's important to realize that, especially in terms of enterprises with employees, there's the whole spectrum actually that you will find in the formal sector is present in the informal sector. And in fact, as you see there, the retail and the street trading sector is shrinking nationally. That means other kind of enterprises, there's a growing share. So it's as diverse as the formal sector and comprises almost all industries. It's not a weird kind of distortion. It is just a reflection of kind of the whole economic spectrum. If you look at employing enterprises, you see mostly in construction, I'll say more about that, retail and services, but also manufacturing and communication. The construction industry or home improvement industry is an important one. I'll say something about that now. Okay, now, what does one do then in such a small town initiative sort of? What can one do? Now, the first step, and that's what we've been doing now, and I'll tell you about that, is to get a picture of what's going on in the township. How many enterprises, what do they do, what sectors, how much are being spent in the township at township enterprises, how much is being spent outside the township in the town, what are the linkages, to get that kind of picture, and then one can start talking to the people living in the township and the business people about change interventions and changing things that are suitable for that particular township. So all I'm saying, the whole town plus township economy must be part of any thinking about township growth and invigoration. Now, okay, what can one do? Now, the first step, and that's what we've done in this particular case, is to survey the enterprises in the township. And I just want to say the pioneering work here was done by the Sustainable Livelihoods Foundation, Andrew Chalman and his colleagues, who pioneered this technique as part of a project I was part of at UCT. So we are using that kind of methodology from them and improving it and customizing. So this is the kind of questions you must do. You must have an enterprise survey, see which locations and so on. Household expenditure, what do people buy? How much do they spend? Where do they spend it? And then the spatial dimension, quite important. Where do they move and walk and buy, so that you can understand the way a township is configured. And one can get people to do that. If you are a town, you can get centers like that, and you can get finance. Let's not get there. This is the kind of things you can create then, how the enterprises are clustered and concentrated in the township, and it's not neat business areas, it's all over in the residential areas. And so now this is very much linked to the walking routes and also the taxi routes and so on. Okay, just sort of exciting kind of pictures you can get for certain kinds of enterprises. Just about the point about the importance of a township. If you look at the population of Rumulotsi itself, it's about 30,000 people. Viljoenskroon, the town, has about 2,000. So how can you think about developing the 2,000 component without looking at the 30,000 components? See the households, the same kind of ratio. Okay. Interesting thing, if you look at business urban, it's very similar actually in the township than in the town itself. The kind of scale and scope and maybe quite different. And the number of enterprises. One point you see in small towns, like in the Free State, is that the formal enterprises in the town itself have had a hard time in the last 5 or 10 years. So it's shrunk in number. So there's a problem there as well. One point about the enterprises in that town, in the township, more than 50% of all enterprises have paid employees. More than half, okay? So it's a high propensity to employ, much higher than the national figure, which is 20%. And then, in addition to enterprises that were identified visually, there are several hundred unsurveyed or invisible artisans that were picked up with a household survey. And they are quite an important potential factor in the town. Okay, another thing that about the scale of the economy there, just the bottom number actually. The total expenditure estimated in that township, based on household surveys, is more than 30 million rand per month. The spending, the income is about 40 million. About the gap, one can talk, but I must say it's a major amount of money. It's not a small economy, much to the surprise of most people, I think. Okay, I want to get to the spending patterns. We had a look at how much do people spend specifically on home maintenance and upgrading. And this one is saying bottom half, 16% of households spent money on that in the last 3 years. And there's no competition really from the big conglomerates or from super spar or from companies in this sector of home improvement and home upgrading. So I think that's an important potential sector. Okay, so these are all the sectors that you find in that area. Also stuff like vehicle things and so on. This is areas that are not so much under competition from national retail change. I think it's important. Okay, what kind of interventions can one do? I just want to mention a few. What we found in the national research as well as the local research so far is that suitable and safe premises in the right location, and that is where people move, is key to success. Okay. Secondly, how to keep the business finances separate from the household. Some form of intuitive bookkeeping or whatever. And then other kinds of training. I don't want to go into that. Just a last word about the premises and facilities. One may need to have discussions with all the planning people because sometimes planning concepts are not really suitable for the sort of organic way that townships develop in, rather than sort of modern ideas of town planning. So that's one. If you want to start somewhere, I would say that's the first place you start, is to get a debate going, do your research, get a debate going, and start a pilot project of constructing premises and see what works, and talk to the people and how they find it, and learning by doing. The second part is skill and capacity issues in terms of bookkeeping and management, but I'm very skeptical of the sort of standard packages that are presented by training agencies. With all due respect to many of them, I think one must learn and listen very hard to what the needs exactly are of township enterprises at different stages of their development, whether they're still very embryonic, whether they are stronger, larger, whatever. Well, that's all.
Thank you so much. Sorry to rush you there at the end with the hat, but okay. I think it will be wonderful if you are. I mean, we already had messages in the chat that you'll hopefully share that with us, and we'll then pass it on to everybody. I mean, the presentation in itself is extremely useful. I think one of the very interesting findings is that, was it 40 million rand that per month that's
yes.
been, yeah, generated just in Ramalotsi. That's incredible. Definitely a sizable financial economy. Okay, next up we have Paul Smith, and Paul is going to be speaking about the partnering and radical collaboration that Kagiso Trust has as their model, and how that can be a key enabler of socioeconomic development. Great. Paul, wonderful.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Nalena. Thought I'd share some of our experience on collaboration. We've been doing this in the education sector and in the local government sector. Yeah, I'm just trying to see how to move forward here. There we go. So I suppose really what we're responding to is what the president said. We need to address the soul of the country. and this is really important. And I mean, that can mean a number of things to different people, but it's really about how we change the perception of people to come together for a common cause and apply the local knowledge to the best of their ability to create the future they really desire and deserve, I suppose, in many ways. I suppose the question is really how effective is this type of behavior, and what does it cost the country? So, and I mean, this is just an illustration of behavior that's not really collaborative, but is rife in South Africa, whether it's in service protests or any other type of protest. And it's not really useful. It doesn't lead to any positive impact for anybody. So we've tried to find a different way of doing things. But in our context, you know, we mentioned this last time, the circular firing squad. We're really all operating in a polarized stakeholder environment, and because of the polarization and because of the social cohesion type issues, our problem is relatively complex. So let's not try to apply a simple solution to a complex problem. It's unlikely to work. But how will this change if we don't talk and listen to each other properly in an authentic way? And I think our biggest challenge may be the quality of our thinking, which I'm glad for this network, because it's certainly when you put people in one room, the quality of thinking really elevates significantly. So we tried this in Makana to some extent, and I suppose, you know, so why collaborate? Well, you know, if everyone enjoys a free ride, not enough people to pull the wagon, it isn't going anywhere. And the simple, if the issues that exist will persist unless we, as a community, collaborate and tackle the issues as a common cause for everybody in our communities. So we need to learn how to tap into our collective wisdom and reap the benefit of teamwork and creative ideation. And I suppose this takes us to a point of sort of when is best practice no longer best practice. And so when we put people in a room, we no longer resort to lazy thinking. It becomes quite a creative space, and we get really good ideas. It lifts the bar of all our thinking in an exponential way. So we need to change direction. Doing the same is what many support agents have done over the years has not really worked, and it's no longer worth persisting with those things. So from a Kisa perspective, we adopted the slogan "Connect before content." So let's fix people first and their relationships, the soul of the community, and their relationships before we try and solve particular issues. So in our case in Makana, we really just spent our time and in the education sector just trying to close the gap between the public sector and community in many ways. We do believe that this pooling of intellect and resources certainly makes a smoother path for impact. So just to go back to a quote, so where does the change start? As this quote says, organizations and communities, only things that happen naturally are confusion, underperformance and friction, and the rest requires leadership. And what we have seen in our communities, and particularly in local government, we've seen a lack of leadership. And even in communities, marginalized communities are often influenced by sort of narcissistic leaders with a narrow personal agenda, which is not really helpful in terms of socioeconomic development. So a true leader is someone who doesn't create separation. A true leader brings people together, and that's what we, as Kahiso, have been trying to do with some significant success in our projects. But I suppose at the end of the day, we've just got to recognize that there are three types of people that exist: the green, the red, and the pink. Green being those who are authentic and foster collaboration. Red are defensive and aggressive in their approaches and win at all costs. And then the most dangerous, which we often find as a dominant culture around in the spaces we work, are those people that overtly are green and covertly are red. And these are really dangerous because you don't get what you see, and they can be very destructive in the process. So when we go into communities and people offer support, don't be surprised if there's a turnaround. But most of us adopt some of these at any given point of time anyway. But we can control how we present ourselves by understanding the skills that enable collaboration, and we can also control how we react to people by understanding what our triggers are and putting up defense mechanisms that make us more collaborative. But some things to think about when dealing with community and stuff that we've used quite extensively. Thinking is difficult, and that's why most people judge. We've got to help people move to more innovative thinking and more creative thinking. And when we put people in a room, it seems one thought seems to trigger the next, and the thought process becomes exponential in terms of quality. And that's really helpful. And the other message we really do like to spread is, blowing someone else's candle out doesn't make yours shine brighter. So don't try and be the star of the class. Rather focus on the outcome and the solution that's been created. I suppose some more things to consider. The aim of the argument or the discussion should not be victory. And in many of our cases, we get around the table and we try and prove to other people that we're right and they're wrong. But that's not very helpful for progress. And obviously, just imagine what we can do as a group like we are, if we have collaboration and get people to work together. I think our impact will be really significant across the country overnight. The book, I just want to put some reading material on the table. This is a book that I think is really useful for individuals on how to navigate the space of collaboration. At the bottom there's a TED talk by James Tarr, who's the author. But the 5 principles, I've said 4, but there are 5. Collaborative intention, stay non-defensive and commit to mutual success in relationships. The next one is openness, create a climate of honesty and openness. We found that's very helpful, a safe place for people to communicate. And this is really important when you're putting people of different levels of academic or intellect on a table, people of different socioeconomic stature and people of different racial denominations around a table. People sometimes don't feel safe in voicing an opinion, and we have to foster this because some of our best ideas come from those who keep quiet. Self-accountability, let's take responsibility for consequences. We're trying to teach municipalities this, politicians and senior management teams and community leaders, both intended and unintended consequences. It's really important for people to see our vulnerability in the moment of collaboration. An awareness of self and others. Know yourself, understand what your bias is and what your prejudice is, and well enough to explore the difficult interpersonal issues to solve problems. And we also need to know those about other people's. Let's listen a bit more and understand their intention and get and in terms of what they hope to achieve out of the process. This will certainly help us collaborate. And the last one is problem solving and negotiation. Negotiate your way through inevitable conflict in a way that builds relationships rather than undermining them. So conflict should be welcomed. If we all understood that what we know is not our own, it's what we've learned and what we've been taught and what we've experienced, then somebody else living in a different context may have a totally different view on the problem we're trying to solve. So it's really worth understanding that what our beliefs and ideas are not really our own. It's just what people have fed us over time. And so let's be open to others in a more collaborative way. The model we've really done there is a 4-pronged model. Situational analysis is not the old status quo assessment. It's really about providing everybody with a more detailed analysis of their context and the situation, and gaining some insight into the local issues, as many speakers have spoken about. Once this is in place, and it could include things like scenario planning, etc., then we focus on sort of 2 stakeholders and prepare them for collaboration. Collaboration takes skill and it takes commitment. And so municipalities and community stakeholders need to be prepared for this. And then once stakeholders are prepared for collaboration, it's not very difficult to mobilize them and pool resources for outcomes. These are just some of the radical collaboration stuff. But I think at the end of the day, pooling resources and capacity certainly makes impact far more achievable. It's our choice.
Do you want to
Thank
be
you,
part of the
Paul.
problem or part of the solution? That's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul. Sorry. But
No, it's
if
fine.
you want to just leave it on that last slide before that, it was fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think, you know, these are almost like tasters, and especially for the last two quite content heavy presentations, it almost feels that we must have a separate session for those that are interested just to participate and have more of a easygoing, or at least less rushed presentation and discussion of that. I am wanting to just invite Andrew to have a little bit of time to draw together literally a 1 or 2 minute input. And in the meantime, if people can drop any thoughts they have into the chat, because we do want to hear from our COGTA representative before we leave, who's going to just be presenting on the small town regeneration process. Andrew, if you want to just have 2 minutes.
Simon, I mean, it's hard to do justice to the length and breadth of the presentations, but in a sense, they are all building blocks of change. I mean, I think what Glenisha and her colleagues from Oudtshoorn were saying is that in any of these change processes, you can't just focus on doing a cleanup or looking at some jobs, or, I mean, those are important, but you've also got to be able to deal with individual and collective trauma in a town, where often it is quite raw still. And issues of history and memory and identity and culture and feelings of belonging or not belonging, you know, feelings of being included or not included, issues around fairness or feelings of unfairness are absolutely critical to any change process. And you've got to work those things into the way in which people engage with each other. I mean, I think Paul's presentation really was how we show up, how we work together. And I really, Paul, your slogan, connect before content, I think echoes some of the work that we were doing around connect, communicate, collaborate. You know, don't start debating the issues until you found some sort of connection. And relationships matter. And then Frederick's presentation really, I mean, apart from connecting town and townships quite consciously, the role of the informal sector was some incredible statistics there. And we ignore that at our peril. You know, if it's just saving the formal shops in the main road or the main street, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that, but without having, every town should have a strategy for how they're going to sustain and support and enable the informal economy, and not just the traders and the waste pickers, but all the sectors of the economy. And certainly if you look at Marcella's article, the work we've been doing in Zwelithemba and places like that, the informal food economy is driving huge amounts of the economy in places like Worcester. So I think, Simon, I mean, there may be a cause for a smaller group in between these larger sessions to focus on informal economy. That could be one, and focusing on partnering and change-making methodologies and how to mobilize people to work together. But let me stop there.
Thanks, Andrew. Preben, I don't know if you can, are you going to share a slide? Preben Govinder from, thank you, from COGTA has been recently onboarded within the National Department with a key role to focus on the small town regeneration strategy and implementation plan. And we were together at the Small Town Regeneration Conference in Oudtshoorn earlier this week. Preben, I don't know if you can take us through what's been happening on that side. We were presented, this was presented by Estelle Orton last session, but if you can just give us an update, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Simon, and good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of the Changemaker Towns Network event. Very quickly, as Simon indicated, the colleagues most of you are aware of the Small Towns Regeneration Strategy, and I have been taken through the presentation. For those of you who have not or who require more information, we can share the more detailed presentation. But very quickly, I'm just provide feedback on in terms of the implementation process and where we are in terms of that process. So just very high level to quickly touch on the approaches that the Small Towns Regeneration Strategy proposes. There are two types of approaches towards the implementation. That's the regional approach, where it's a group gathering of small towns that function together within a region. A typical example is the Karoo, and the town-based approach is basically it's your small town, and looking towards the regeneration process in terms of uplifting that specific town. Very quickly, this map provides an indication of the priority towns from priority 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the process that was undertaken through the strategy. So this is just a spatial representation throughout the country. So going into the implementation, just to highlight a few key points, which I've just highlighted in red in the interest of time. So just to note that the department will be on board this process from the beginning and will be there to support the entire process with the local municipalities. And the role of the municipalities of DCOC is obviously to make sure that we raise awareness and lobby for support towards the implementation of the strategy, looking at leverage the use of existing resources available where we can influence the implementation of the small towns regeneration, building partnerships, ensuring that the integration of the STR within existing government programs, and also creating through the STR an enabling mechanism for communities to participate in the governance. So the role of a small town and a local municipality, I think this is critical, considering the processes that are involved in the small town regeneration strategy and the outcomes of those processes. The municipality needs to take a lead. I think the success of this implementation is really on the municipality and working with the communities and working with government departments, the private sector, to make sure that we do realize the regeneration of small towns. Very quickly, in terms of the piloting approach, we in the current financial year, we're looking to implement the strategy in 3 pilot towns. The first is Modimolle, which is in the Limpopo province, Piketberg, which is in the Western Cape, and Senekal, which is in the Free State. So these piloting processes have basically been formed to enable a learning experience as well. From the Modimolle pilot process, it's linked to the DDM process. With the Piketberg town, there's willingness from Bergrivier local municipality, and also in terms of Senekal, there's been success in that aspect where the Senekal Matobeng Community Forum has really made progress in this space. And I think from these 3 experiences, it'll assist in learning and improving the implementation process. So this slide just basically provides an indication on how the department wishes to implement the STR, and it's going to be an incremental process. We are currently in phase 1, which is we are starting now, and we want to implement this for the 3 pilot towns. As the years increase, we will be increasing the support to small towns in terms of the identified priority towns within the strategy. Very quickly, the STR governing structures, there will be a task team at national level with the South African Local Government Association and DCOC, and basically we'll be looking to set up the task team in this current financial year, identify the project champions, identify the stakeholders, training and development to ensure that members of the task team are equipped and able to implement the strategy effectively. The role of a municipality will be to identify a project champion. We mentioned the establishment of a local community forum and ensuring that there's an agreement in place with the local municipality and that forum. And then part of the process will be the drafting of a precinct plan, which will guide the spatial implementation of the STR. So this is just basically highlighting the critical factors again, which I've just touched on previously. So where are we in terms of the implementation process? Well, the Small Towns Regeneration Strategy was officially launched on the 28th of February this year by our Honorable Deputy Minister. To date, with the Deputy Minister, we have visited the pilot towns with the intention of creating relationships and establishing working relationships. We are in consultation with the pilot towns in terms of the establishment of task teams through the conference that we were at earlier this week. We did receive positive feedback in terms of those processes. The local municipalities are actually going to council to take resolutions on the task teams, so they are working proactively. We started data collection, working with the pilot towns or the pilot municipalities and gathering information. And we intend on having follow-up engagements with these pilot municipalities. And from a departmental perspective, we are making progress in terms of appointing a service provider for the implementation processes. Simon, if you would allow me, I'd just like to allow Ms. Estelle Orton to come in and add if she has anything to add quickly. Thank you.
Thanks, Pravin. Estelle?
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Simon, and thanks, Pravin, for the opportunity to say something. I think what is important that is coming out of this strategy is that this strategy can be initiated by the community. You don't have to wait for you don't have to wait for government. You don't have to wait for the municipality. A community can start with this implementation process of the small town regeneration strategy. Something else that is quite important that came out of this discussions for today is that we must realize that when you look at the regeneration of the small town, and this is something that's at the heart of the regeneration strategy as well, is that you've got two aspects. You've got your community and you've got your town. And I think a lot of what we've heard today from, for example, the Klein Karoo Kunstefees, is that is the community side of it, discovering those stories in a community, discovering what matters most to the community. But there's also that aspect that we've heard about, you know, the informal sector and the importance of that. And that all needs to come together and work together if you want to realize small town regeneration. And that is being incorporated into the small town regeneration strategy. The strategy is available online on Carta's website. We can also post a link in the chat where the strategy is available. If there's any questions around the strategy and how you can start the process within your town, you're more than welcome to either contact myself or Pravin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Estelle. There was one question, if you wouldn't mind just helping in the chat around Modimolle being a pilot town, if there can be more information about this piloting in Modimolle and otherwise. Otherwise, we will definitely follow that question up with information and connect you, Daniel. There isn't really any time for extensive Q&A now. If you do have questions that you would like responded to immediately, please drop them into the chat now and we can try and answer them on the chat as well. Otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Andrew. Andrew, you have 2 minutes to round us all up. Also a reminder that if anyone has resources or events that they would like to share, any kind of upcoming events that you know of in your town, or that you would like to invite other people to online or in person, if you can just pop those into the chat now, it would be great. You can also always email me afterwards, and we'll share that when we send out the communique in about a week's time. Andrew?
Simon, I would first just like to really thank both Pravin and Estelle for a very refreshing emphasis in the presentation. It's not often that one hears from government in a formal strategy that they're going to focus, amongst other things, on enabling mechanisms for communities to participate in governance. That was in the presentation. Estelle was a little bit more blunt. She said, don't wait for government. Don't wait for the municipality. Start doing things. And hopefully we connect. You know, and that's the whole point of this. So I really think it's about enabling bottom-up initiatives and then connecting them to the top-down authorizing environment, which is also trying to push a process of change. And I think we'll come back to this point. I do think it would be quite interesting at an appropriate stage to hear from the communities in those 3 pilot sites of the STR, how they're experiencing it, what they're doing about it, how they're engaging with their municipality or government. Because in a sense, that's one of the tests of the success of the strategy. I would just conclude with Christy thanking everyone for a commitment to knowledge sharing. If I just look at this chat, the richness of the resources that have been posted there by everyone being very open and, you know, drawing attention to articles, who's doing what, various other initiatives. I mean, just publishing this on this network is going to hugely amplify what everyone is doing. So I really want to thank people for a commitment to open knowledge sharing, because if we hoard information amongst ourselves, we can't learn. So I think that's been a really great step forward. And then just going to perform Leila's first point about growing the contact database. And it's really going back to the thing about relationships matter, or connect before content. We've got to reach out and draw more people into the network. We need to be able to influence other people in the system. And you can't command or instruct influence. You have to be in a relationship. So let's work on building those links. Let's work on connecting, and then we can start influencing each other. And also the point there is, if we want to influence other people, we've got to be open to being influenced by them as much as we want to influence them. So I'll just leave on that note. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. And if everyone can grab the instruments and what I hope becomes a little bit of a tradition in Changemaker Towns Network, and switch on their mics again. Don't forget to switch on your mics, otherwise we can't hear the beautiful noise that we're about to produce. And if you want to say goodbye, but let's do it.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks to the EP.
Well,
All the best, guys.
bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.